We in the United States throw away more food than any other country in the world, upwards of 80 billion pounds of it per year. We toss out 30% of the food that we purchase. So, on today's podcast, I'm joined by my good friend Carleigh Bodrug. She's the author of the new cookbook called Scrappy Cooking. And we're going to talk all about how you can reduce your food waste and how you can use foods that maybe you would normally toss out to actually become parts of delicious, wonderful, nutritious recipes. So she's going to talk all about how we can, let's say, extend the length of your bread so that you don't toss it out too early. We're going to talk all about how you can actually turn banana peels into bacon, believe it or not, into tasty bacon. How you can take those potato skins that you would normally toss out when you're making, let's say, mashed potatoes, and turn those potato skins into potato chips, and a whole lot more. So let me introduce you to Carleigh Bodrug. Carleigh Bodrug is the CEO and founder of Plant You, and she is a New York Times best-selling cookbook author and self-taught plant-based chef. She is famous for her simple take on low waste and vegan recipes. Boasting over 7 million followers between her social channels, Carleigh has gripped social media with her simple and delicious low waste recipes that make plants the stars of the show. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's get started with my interview with Carleigh Bodrug. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Carleigh. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm so grateful you're having me on.
All right, well, let's start by having you tell us your story. How did you get to really where you are today? I mean, you've got over 7 million followers on social media. You're a self-taught chef. You've got the series called Scrappy Cooking. How did you get to this place you're at now where you are really one of social media's darling chefs?
So it probably started in about 2015, and the World Health Organization had this breaking news that red and processed meat were now classed as group 2 and group 1 carcinogens. And that's not normally something I would think about, but I was working in journalism at the time, and my dad was a stage 2 colon cancer survivor. So he had had cancer when I was 11 years old, went through chemotherapy, surgery, the whole bit, but no one had ever mentioned to him about diet. So we had continued eating what I would describe as the standard American diet, or I'm Canadian, so
So say you're eating the standard Canadian diet.
the standard Canadian diet. And at the time, we had this like pie chart that the Canadian government or Health Canada put out that had like these big groupings of what you should eat in a day. And like half the pie chart was meat and dairy. So my parents were just doing their best, thinking that that was what we should be eating is the main source of sustenance. And fast forward to 2015, and we're just so shocked because there is this big link between diet and colon cancer. So at that time, really started delving into research about a plant-based diet, watched all the documentaries. And I always say when you go plant-based, it's kind of like opening Pandora's box because you learn about the health, but then you're also learning about the environmental implications of animal agriculture as well as the animals. So my family and they went like plant predominant, still including animal products, and I ended up going vegan. It took me about a year. And just my whole education's in journalism, so I felt like it was natural to start talking about this. Felt really passionate about it. Like not enough people were talking about the benefits of a plant-based diet and how really easy and delicious it can be. So I had never cooked up until this point a vegan meal in my life, was not at all somebody who was even into cooking. I went to university, I remember, stocked with a fridge full of tater tots and like mini pizzas. My college friends are just like dismayed that this shift has happened. And I started sharing really like my honest journey on social media under the name Plant You. And eventually it gained just a lot of traction. It was very, very bizarre to me. And I thought, there's something here. Like, I would really like to dedicate my life and my more time to this. So in 2019, I took the jump. I had launched a meal plan subscription where I was sending out weekly PDF meal plans. People would pay $7.99 per month to subscribe. It later turned into an app. And that enabled me to leave my job, then sign my first book deal. And then when my first book came out 2 years ago, I learned this statistic about food waste. And it just about stopped me in my tracks because I learned that 30 to 40% of the entire US food supply, and the Canadian statistics are even a little bit worse, which is
Oh,
crazy,
wow.
um, ends up in landfills. And immediately my mind, when I heard this statistic, was like, oh, so the food decomposes. But it does, but unfortunately it's not good for our environment. So that's where Scrappy Cooking was born.
And so now you have really brought that into this viral series that you have on social media. How did you start thinking about that? I mean, what made you start thinking about food waste and that being something that you're actually going to, I mean, it really is one of your big missions, and you turn
100%.
it into this book and everything.
Yeah, so learned that statistic and started thinking a lot about food waste in my own home. Of course, at the time now I'm a food blogger, cookbook author,
Yeah.
and I'm recipe testing all the time, wasting a lot of probably unnecessary food. Now
Okay.
feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm wasting money that I don't have, and also not contributing to the planet that I want to see. So one day I just threw up an orange peel candy recipe. I didn't think much of it. It was something I was like doing with the scraps of my orange peels. And I called it Scrappy Cooking. I don't even know how I came up with the name. Just threw it up there. Walked away from my phone because I was like, "Oh goodness," as I do when I post any video on social media, walk away because you never know what the reaction is going to be. And I came back an hour later and the video had over 1 million views. People
Mm,
were just going crazy over it. So it was
mm.
like, wow, there's something here. This would be a great cookbook concept. And additionally, I just felt it was a really important thing that nobody was talking about. Like I just have not. We go to school and we hear about plane emissions and taking too long of showers, and we're not talking at all in terms of environmental impact about one of the leading sources, which is food waste.
So then, what are some of the biggest sources of food waste throughout the U.S. and Canada?
Yeah, it's actually the number one wasted food is bread.
Mm.
So we just buy, I think a lot of us probably go to bakeries or we go to the bakeries in our grocery store and we buy bread each week. But the problem is that oftentimes the loaves are large. Like if you're one person, that's a lot of bread to get through. Or it's very fresh and then it kind of hardens in a couple of days. So bread is the number one. Oftentimes people will also turn their heads to wonky looking vegetables and food. So the great example of this would be like a wonky kind of shaped butternut squash. One statistic about bananas that really always kind of shocks me is that people will leave the single bananas, the poor single bananas. They always just buy them in bunches. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of bananas that go to waste. And then there's this whole other part to this where we don't consume a lot of food that can be consumed that we're already purchasing. So I always like to use the example of broccoli stems. So you purchase your broccoli, oftentimes you're paying for it by weight, and then you're throwing out the stem, which is this, it has more sulforaphane than the florets. Super good for you. It tastes almost like asparagus. You just have to peel the outer edge, and it's providing so many more calories from the broccoli than would normally have. So there's this whole other conversation about scraps where we're even getting this stuff into our home and then discarding of it.
So I'd like to go into some specific things that people can do with the foods that they have in their house, whether it is to save them so that they don't end up as scraps, or to actually use these scraps as a new way to create food. So first thing is, you mentioned that bread is the most wasted food. What are some suggestions that people can do to prevent them from wasting the bread?
Absolutely. So bread, there's so many things you can do, but I will say before we get into this, I don't want anybody consuming things with mold on them.
Yes.
I mean, I am someone that will cut the mold off, but like we're looking for bread that's kind of gone stale, so it's like hard,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Real quick, do not cut mold off of bread and eat it, because that mold can actually spread.
oh, this
It's
is
not
good to know.
just in that location. And I tell you, I'm not a chef. I'm not a foodie, but I have seen many. There's actually a doctor that I follow, a couple of doctors, but one of them, Karen Rajan, he just had a book come out. This book can save your life. He's a general surgeon out in England, And he did have a video where he's like, look, don't cut mold off of your bread and eat it, because the mold is not just in that location. It actually, the spores have spread. By the time you get mold, it's actually throughout the whole thing.
That's horrifying.
Yes. So if you have mold, even if a little bit of mold on your bread, don't don't pay attention to what we're saying on this podcast as far as, you need to say, this is something you should waste.
Yes. I always
Waste
like to
that.
provide that disclaimer. Like, we're not talking about food that has spoiled. So I always
Yes.
say, like, do a smell test, look at for any signs of mold. If it's gotten to that point, it's time to discard. But if
Yes.
your bread has just gone a bit hard in the cupboard and there's no signs of like actual spoilage, then what you can do with it, I have this really great vegan French toast casserole recipe in the book. So you just break it into chunks. You're basically rehydrating it, breaking it into chunks, putting it in a casserole dish with a beautiful custard made of vegan yogurt, coconut milk, a little bit of turmeric for color. Pop that in the oven for about 30 minutes, and you have this gorgeous French toast adjacent casserole dish. But my mind immediately, when we talk about stale bread, would be making breadcrumbs. This is what a lot of restaurants do, or croutons. So to make breadcrumbs, you can just blend your bread so it becomes crummy, add a little bit of fresh parsley, spices to your liking, and then bake them, and now you've made delicious breadcrumbs that can be used for like breading tofu or anything like that. And then similarly, croutons, just cutting your bread into chunks if it's gone hard, seasoning with a little bit of oil and nutritional yeast, maybe parsley, pop it in the oven, and you've got beautiful croutons for salads. So
That
those are
sounds
my
very good.
three top tips for bread.
Okay, now one of the things that you recommend, and you give recommendations in your book about storing leafy greens. That's one thing that I see in my house that we throw away, I think, more than I would like. Is how do you store leafy greens so that they don't go bad very quickly?
This is always a thing. People buy a well-intentioned box of spinach for the week, and then it's like
Hmm.
screaming at them from the back of their fridge at the end of the
Yeah, or
week.
you get
So
the bag of salad that's like
yeah.
pre-washed, and then it lasts you like 2 days, and you feel bad because then you throw it out.
Yeah, the problem here is the moisture content, and you've probably seen it if you've ever bought spinach, right? If it's a bit wet, you're a little bit in trouble. So you want to make sure that it's really dry. And
Hmm.
the easiest way to do that, and you can even store it if you buy those like kind of big plastic packaging, you can store it in there, is getting a clean paper towel or a really clean cloth and just laying it down on the bottom and the top. This will suck up the moisture and keep your greens way more fresh. You can also wrap them in paper towel if you're not storing them in a sealable container. And then a lot of people also have problems with herbs, so cilantro, parsley. So I always recommend storing them like a bouquet because they do need moisture that's the opposite from the roots so that they're keep staying fresh. Or you can wrap them in a moist cloth or paper towel, and that will keep them really fresh for at least a couple of days longer. But I always say, when in doubt, like if maybe you're heading away for the weekend, you bought a box of spinach, you didn't eat it, it's still okay to eat, it's not spoiled. I always say freeze it. I'm a huge
Yeah.
smoothie person, love throwing spinach in my smoothies. You can even take this one step further and take that spinach that you're going to be putting in your freezer and blend it up with some coconut water and then put it in an ice cube tray and then put it in your freezer. And these make, like, I like to call them smoothie bombs. So you can just add just one ice cube of spinach to your smoothies, and it's really easy and delicious
Oh,
and
that's cool. Yeah,
accessible
that's
in that
interesting.
way.
I've never thought of that, but that's a great idea. All right, how about nuts and seeds? Is it not okay to store your nuts and seeds in the pantry? Will they last longer if you store them in a different manner?
Yeah, speaking of mold, nuts and seeds are really, and you don't see it. They can mold really easily and get mold spores. So you're best to store them in the fridge if you're not going to consume them within a couple of weeks. So that's a huge tip, and especially something I know a lot of plant-based people eat a lot of flax meal, so
Hmm.
ground flax seeds. So you definitely want to store that in the fridge in a sealable container. That's going to keep your nuts a lot more fresh. But one thing I want to mention about food waste is you want to go for the low hanging fruit here. So you
Hmm.
don't ever want to get this food in your home so it has a potential to be wasted. So what I like to tell people is it's not necessarily about like going extreme scrappy. Like, this stuff is very fun, but really reducing food waste starts with meal planning. I always say if you're wanting to save money, like you can save 30% on your grocery bill if you're going to really work hard at this. And this starts by just sitting down on a Sunday. You don't need any fancy cookbook, you don't need an app or anything. Just write down Monday to Friday, breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe dessert, what you're planning to eat for the week. You can leave some spontaneity in there. And then from there, look at what you're going to eat, make recipes from them, go on Pinterest, and then look at your fridge and pantry. Look at what you already have before you head to the grocery store. Then go to the grocery store with a plan. This is the most important thing, is like if you're going to bring something into your home, are you actually going to eat it? And I think it's a product of our society. I mean, in North America, we waste way more food than any other country. And the ultimate answer there is because we're so busy. We're heading to the grocery store, we're buying all of this food. We're a culture who likes to buy, and then we don't have a plan or a use for it. So that's the low hanging fruit there, is actually just heading to the grocery store and not bringing the food into your home to begin with that you're going to waste.
I think that's why my wife does not like me going grocery shopping with her, because she always, okay, she plans everything out. She's got it in her head. This is what we got to get. And then I go with her and I just start throwing things into the car.
Yeah, you
And
sound like
it's
my
like,
husband. I can't send him grocery shopping. I'm like, all this unnecessary stuff will end up in the house.
All right, so we're talking about reusing food. We're talking about how to prevent food waste. What are some of the hardest foods that you have found to reuse? Maybe
Hmm.
some foods that people would normally think, oh, we should toss that, but you found that actually it can work. Or
Yeah.
maybe some things that maybe just you've tried to and won't work as well.
Yeah, there's some tough ones. I mean, I remember getting pomegranates and the peels are so large, right? And
Yeah,
thinking, how can you possibly eat this? And
yeah.
before you consume anything, I mean, you can reference my book if you have it, but Google and make sure it's safe to consume, because there
Okay.
are a few things I believe, like peach pits and stuff like that,
Mhm.
can contain some toxic elements. So you want to be err on the side of caution always. But pomegranate peels you can actually bake and then grind, dehydrate and then grind down into a powder, and then you can make
Hmm.
like a pomegranate peel tea. And then when you're thinking about eating the skins of things, of course you want to think about buying organic if you can, and then giving them a good wash. But another one is citrus peels. A lot of people just discard their citrus peels, but they're of such value, really. I have a great recipe in my book that's probably my favorite recipe, called a lemon peel pesto. So you
Hmm.
just peel the lemon peels with a potato peeler to avoid the pith, and then you blend them with cashews, nutritional yeast, garlic. It makes this like very vibrant, if you're a citrus fan, flavoring.
Hmm.
Another one that comes to mind that I always used to discard are radish leaves and beet leaves. So these are things that we're taking into our home. They're super nutrient dense. They're really no different. We just look at them differently for some reason than the chard or the kale that you're buying at the store. They're perfectly edible, delicious, nutrient dense greens. And they can be just tossed in a salad, but I love to make them into something like I call a scrappy pesto. So this is something we make probably weekly with greens, and it's kind of to your earlier point about the spinach going bad in the back of the fridge. When in doubt, you can throw it in a blender again with maybe soaked sunflower seeds, garlic, nutritional yeast, and salt, and blend it up into a pesto. And then you can use that as a pasta sauce, as a dip, as a spread on toast. So many different things. So you just when you bring the food into your home, you can look at it and kind of think, okay, wait, I'm throwing this out every week, like my carrot tops. What can I do with this, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when you're doing this as a chef and you've got in your mind, okay, I'm gonna try this, and I'm gonna try using this ingredient that, this peel or these leaves that haven't really been put in recipes before. I mean, how often do you find as a chef that you're creating this and you taste it and you go, oh my gosh, this is terrible? And then what do you do with it? Because now here you are, somebody who's writing a book on scrappy cooking, on how to reduce food waste. And I mean, do you create this in really small batches, or how does that work out for you in your household?
Yeah, it happens less often than you think, but one that immediately comes to mind is this lemon peel pesto again, because when I first tested that recipe, I used the entire pith of the lemon, and the sauce was so bitter. Um, I'm lucky to have a husband who will eat just about anything
Oh,
as
there
long
you
as it's
go.
like consumable. But when in doubt, I mean, I'm the first to admit I still have food waste. Like this is
Yeah.
not, I am not a monolith for like being absolutely zero waste. I try my best. But we have this amazing program where I live, and I always tell this to people: you don't necessarily need like a backyard composter to take care of your food waste. Our city will pick up a green bin week with our food waste, which is amazing. So
Hmm.
oftentimes, if I test something and it doesn't work out, which is less often that it's literally not consumable, there's levels, right? But if that happens, then I'll simply compost it with our green bin program in our city. And the reason we want to, I wanted to mention this earlier, the reason we want to avoid this food decomposing in landfills is because it actually emits a really powerful greenhouse gas called methane. And the emissions from food waste are actually larger than the entire airline industry. So if you think
Wow.
about that, it's just astonishing. It's astonishing because all of this food piles up with all of the plastic and whichever else in the landfills, and it doesn't make a pretty picture. So if you can find a composting option, I mean, there's even those loamies or countertop composters, or I know in New York they have like composting areas where you can bring your compost each week. That's a great option. That's kind of again like a low hanging fruit in order to reduce your environmental impact.
For those people who maybe aren't that familiar with composting, can you explain why composting can be better in general for the environment than just tossing your food in the garbage?
Absolutely, because composting you break down into soil. So then the soil can be very nutrient dense. Like if you're using plants and food to compost, your soil, it will break down into soil and then that can be used for growing more food. So it's like a oh my goodness. It's a regenerative
Regenerative.
it's a regenerative, I can't say it. It's
Regenerative.
it's a system that will give back. So you're now making your food into soil that will grow more food, which is a great thing for the planet. So if you can contribute to some sort of composting system, again, it doesn't have to be in your backyard. There's usually systems in place in your cities. That's just your sure bet of really doing something with the food that you're wasting. But again, at the end of the day, you don't even want to bring this extra food into your home because when we think, Anthony, about grocery prices, I don't know about you, but I am just like so shocked every time I go to the grocery store about the amount of money being spent. And this is a huge problem with inflation. And if we can cut that individually by 30% by just not wasting food, that's a huge self motivator right there for reducing food waste.
All right, well, we've got a couple of recipes that I pulled from your book that I thought were really interesting. So, her book is called Scrappy Cooking: 140 plus plant based zero waste recipes that are good for you, your wallet, and the planet. And this is Carleigh's second book. Her first book was a New York Times bestseller called Plant You, super popular. And even if you are not a plant based person, these recipes are delicious. I have made some of them. My wife, this is one of my wife's favorite cookbooks. And we are not strictly plant based. We do eat meat, but these recipes will make you not miss eating meat. So even once again, if you're not plant based, definitely check out her cookbooks because they are fantastic, and they're beautiful. I mean, the photos are just absolutely
Thank
gorgeous. Do you take
you.
the photos yourself, or do you have somebody do
Not
that
for
for
my
you?
second one. I did for my first, which was a painful experience.
Yeah,
For my second,
yeah,
I had
yeah.
an
The lighting
amazing
and
photographer. So,
oh wow,
yeah, it's
yeah.
I'm so proud of how it looks. I think the visuals are just really really eye catching.
My wife is big. She loves cookbooks. That's for me when I buy gifts for her, and if I can't think of anything to get her, I can always get her a cookbook because she
Yeah.
loves them. And there's so many out there, and the fact is that you have some cookbooks where there's very few photos at all in some of them. And yours, every single recipe has got a beautiful photograph of the food. Now, when I make this food, it never looks as beautiful as yours. It looks like it's like the difference when you see a commercial of like a McDonald's Big Mac and then you see a Big Mac in real life, like that's your recipe being made on your book. And then when I make it, it looks like the real life. But I'm sure when you make it, it looks that beautiful. But there's some really, I think, interesting recipes, ones that are like, wow, this is really cool. I haven't thought of this. So I want to bring a few of these up for you because I think that they're very original and unique. And I'd love to, and I haven't made these yet. So I'd love to get your opinion of how this works and if it really does taste that good because they look great. So, first one, I love bacon. And I don't eat much of it, I because I know that it's literally it is the arguably one of the worst foods that you can eat when you look at free radicals and advanced glycation end products. And I always feel guilty because I know that pigs are very intelligent animals and all of that. But you have a recipe where you can turn banana peels into bacon. And that
Yeah.
to me, like I eat bananas almost every day, and there's no way I'm going to eat that peel. I always throw it out. How do you turn freaking banana peels into something that resembles bacon and tastes good?
Yeah, it's funny. You will be surprised if you ever try this how bacon like it is. And it really all comes down to the marinade. So we make an amazing marinade with soy sauce, spices. You can add a little bit of liquid soak and soak the banana peels after you remove kind of that inner flesh. And then you just air fry them or bake them and they become like a crispy bacon. And I know not everybody is going to want to eat banana peels, so I also provided an option that is like the identical recipe with oyster mushrooms. So this is like a tamer one. But yeah, the banana peel one is spectacular. And I've had friends, family try it, and they're just so shocked when I tell them after they do that it's banana peels. So it's one to watch. And if you're not somebody who's going to consume your banana peels, and I don't blame you, you don't have to, you can also add them to water and let them soak with water for 24 hours, and that creates a really nutrient dense plant water for your house plants if you're wanting
Huh.
to use them in another way. Yeah.
So banana peels are actually edible.
Yeah, they're completely edible.
Do
And in
they
some
have
countries, people eat the bananas with the peels. So, yeah.
really? Do
Yeah.
they have like a taste to them then, or
It's
is it
very
okay?
neutral, which is why it creates a great kind of vessel for like a really delicious marinade. And then because of the look of them being like long and then maybe spotted, they create like a very realistic plant-based bacon.
Wow. Okay. All right. That one I definitely have to try because I mean, you do wonder. I mean, that's funny because if you make it, you have some people who are visiting and you make that for them and they're eating it and you're like, yeah, what do you think? And they're like, oh, this tastes good. Like, yeah, it's banana peels. I mean, imagine the look on their face, like, what the heck? Okay. And I know that there are, and they aren't, I'm sure not real potatoes. So when I grew up in small town in the middle of Michigan, and I ate a lot of what they call tater skins, I think is what they're called. But they're like potato chips, but they're the skins or something. And they tasted really good. And I'm sure that they were not actually made of that. But you actually have a recipe where you turn the actual skins of potatoes that you peel off. And we have a huge, we peel potatoes, you got a huge stack of it, and you throw it in the garbage. And you can actually reuse those as potato chips.
Yeah, this one is so funny. And I grew up eating potato skins. Like, my parents would just serve the potatoes with the skins on. And I don't know if it's a Canadian thing, but every time I post a recipe where I
Yeah.
leave the skin on the potatoes, people are up in arms. And I'm like, what? So this is this one was inspired by that because I'm like, there's obviously a lot of people peeling their potatoes. And
Oh,
what you
yeah.
can do with them is just toss them in a little bit of spices and then put them in your oven or air fryer, crisp them up, and they make such delicious. I would compare them to like chips. And the great thing about these is they're so rich in fiber, super
Mhm.
fiber rich and delicious and really easy to make. And if you're ever making mashed potatoes, keep those skins and you can even
Yeah.
crisp them up and serve them over top of like a salad or your mashed potatoes. So good.
I'm definitely going to try that. So I am a big tofu fan. I mean, being Asian, yeah. So yeah, I eat tofu. I'm Korean American. So, but you have a recipe because, but the problem with tofu and with soybeans in today's society is so much of it is GMO. I mean, it's an issue. So how do you make tofu without actually using soybeans? And does
Yeah.
it actually taste like tofu, which tastes like nothing, but then it can taste like whatever you marinate it with?
Yeah, so it's really cool. You can actually make tofu out of beans. And I first tried this with red lentils, actually, and then I ended up experimenting. But it's a really easy process. You blend your tofu, or sorry, not your tofu, your red lentils or your beans. I think in the book I used white beans
Yeah.
with water, and then you heat it on a pan and it will thicken up. And then you transfer it to a mold, either a tofu mold or I've just used a glass container, put it in the fridge, and a few hours later it will be hardened like tofu.
Hmm.
It has maybe a bit of a bean flavor, quite neutral. And especially
Mhm.
when you're going to bake it up and put it in sauce, it's really delicious. And the reason I did this is because I find people get my books and I just really want everybody to be accommodated. So often people will be soy free, allergic to soy, maybe they don't eat soy, nut free. So this is just another kind of feather in your cap where you can also make tofu out of beans and enjoy all of these tofu recipes that you're seeing because it will bake up just like your tofu does.
Um, and another one is that I thought was really interesting, and I'm not a huge corned beef fan, but I know there are people out there who are, and you can make corned beef out of celeriac. What's celeriac, first of all?
So I was walking through the grocery store when I was recipe testing for Scrappy, and I saw the ugliest vegetable that I have ever seen in my life, and that is a celeriac. And you've probably seen them in the grocery store. They're just these hairy, almost look like a coconut, light. They have like roots growing out of them, and I thought, what is that? And I had never had it before,
And you're
so
like,
I
I'm going
got
to make corned beef out of this.
yeah, so I got it home and I started like playing with the thing. I'm like, what can you do with this thing? I think some people eat it fresh. And then I had used daikon radish before to make like a meat substitute. And I felt like when I opened up the celeriac that it had a similar vibe to it. So I
Hmm.
just shaved it down and then coated in this beautiful marinade, like a corned beef kind of mustard, soy sauce, really delicious, rich marinade. And I baked it. The only thing with celeriac is you need to bake it for quite a long time for it to tenderize. But when you've cut it into these like really thin strips and then marinated it and baked it, it makes like a corned beef substitute. And
Hmm.
then you top that on a sandwich. It's like 10 out of 10 delicious
Oh, wow. Yeah, I
and
mean, the recipe
transformed
looked,
from
yeah,
an
the recipe
ugly,
looked
ugly
beautiful.
vegetable.
Do you do a lot with jackfruit?
Yes, I've done a lot with jackfruit. I have a jackfruit recipe in my book. It's like a jackfruit stew. It's such a great versatile, but I will say do not go to your grocery store, usually your Asian grocery store and buy a whole jackfruit. That will inevitably end up in waste. I always
Yeah,
suggest
they're
people buy the
huge.
canned. They're just
Yeah,
massive
yeah,
and they're
yeah.
a lot to deal with when you
Hmm.
get that home. It's just so big. So I always recommend buying the canned stuff. It's a lot easier to deal with. And I mean, there's no shame in buying canned beans, frozen food, like frozen fruit and vegetables are often harvested earlier than the stuff that you're getting in your grocery store. So it's often more nutrient dense. No shame in that. Whatever you can do to support your healthy lifestyle is a win.
All right, I've got a couple of ones for you, and I'm just going to test you, and we'll see if you have a solution for this. And if you don't, that's okay. Um, I haven't seen this in your book, but maybe I missed it. How about watermelon rinds?
Yeah, I have
Rinds?
a recipe for this in my book,
Oh, you do?
watermelon
Oh, you
rind
got me.
pickles. So they're really delicious watermelon rinds, and you can pickle them, and they'll taste a lot like pickles. I've also made watermelon rind jam, so that's like cooking it down just like a jam you would, and you end up blending it in. It's really delicious.
How about avocado skins? Those are not
Avocado
edible, are
skins,
they?
they're not edible. I don't think
Okay.
so. I've never, but you know what you can do with the pits of avocado and avocado skins? If you're like very scrappy, you can soak them or boil them in hot water and it will create a natural purple dye for clothes. I
Hmm.
haven't tried it, but it's super interesting and it's something I've been wanting to try. But yeah, and then you see also people take the pits of avocados and store them with their guacamole to keep it fresh. Don't know if it
Mhm.
works, but maybe something to consider.
One thing I did on the Rachel Ray show many years ago is we did a segment on it was called Facelift from Your Fridge. And so we basically did look at using these things that you would toss out, and instead of eating them, is how can you use them in some manner, in a beauty type of manner. And
Oh,
so we took
cool.
actually the avocado skins and there's usually a little bit of avocado kind of pulp still in there. And then you put that over your elbows or over your knees, and it really kind of conforms the shape of those joints. And it's very moisturizing. And so somebody who's got really dry skin on their elbows or their knees, you can literally moisturize that skin with the actual inside of that avocado skin. And it's also kind of rough. And so you get some exfoliation from it too. And then the other thing that came to mind that we did is potato skins, and you take that biscuit, you boil it in water, and you take the water, let that cool, and then you rinse your hair with it, and it actually acts as like a temporary hair dye.
Do you
Uh,
a hair dye?
yeah, it actually dyes grays into like a brownish color.
I
Yeah, it's
need
kind of
that.
interesting, but it doesn't last very long. It may last a few washes at the most, but it's just kind of an interesting thing. And now people are even using like rice water,
I was gonna
the
say
water.
rice water. Do you use
Yeah,
rice
and
water?
so you can use that if you rinse your hair with that. There are people that find that it may help overall with thinning of the hair. And that makes sense just because a lot of the serums that you use now to help with hair are basically just filled with antioxidants. Sometimes they've got adaptogens, they've got healthy fats and stuff like that. And there's no magic to some of these serums and these washes and shampoos. It's just the fact that they're just healthy sources of nutrients for the hair. So
I'm even seeing now in skincare that people it will say like rice water
yeah.
serum, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
So
that's
rice
so
water is, yeah,
interesting.
one of those things. And yeah. So it's kind of funny. All right. So a few more questions I'd like to go over with you. First one is going to be, or the next one is going to be, other than you mentioned bread, what are some other foods that people toss out too early
Too
that we think,
early.
oh, we've got to get rid of these? It's, like bread. Oh, the bread's starting to get stale. Let's throw it out. But maybe it's too early. Obviously, once again, if it's got mold on it, you do have to toss it. But short of
Yes.
getting mold, what are some other foods that people tend to toss out earlier than they should?
My mind immediately goes to berries, and I am a huge raspberries are my favorite fruit in the world. And I just find you
Yeah,
get
I
them
love
home, and then
raspberries.
all of a sudden they're mushy, and
Hmm.
no signs of mold again. But there's so many things that you can do with them, berries that you should not be throwing them out if they've gone like a little bit soft. So you can make jam. I have a great fruit leather recipe in my book where you blend them and then dehydrate on a sheet pan and it makes like a fruit roll up. So and then also I have a something called a not picky fruit crisp. So this is for any fruit. So this can apply to like your peaches have gone like a little bit soft, so you don't want to just
Hmm.
take a bite of it. Bake it down into a fruit crisp.
Hmm.
That's the one that comes to mind. I think people waste a lot of fruit when it's kind of bruised, and
Hmm.
it's just unnecessary. And then again, when in doubt, pop it into a freezer bag and you're good to go. And one thing I didn't mention that I want to mention is and speaking of Rachel Ray, I learned this watching Rachel's 30-minute meals growing up. She always had like a scrap bowl next to her when she was cooking
Hmm.
her stuff, and she would add like her onion skins or whichever else. If you're somebody who eats meat, maybe you add your bones to that. And then I like to transfer all of those to a freezer bag, store them in my freezer until it's full. And once it's full, you can just add to a stock pot, add water until it's over the scraps, as well as some
Hmm.
spices like turmeric and black pepper, and then boil that down and drain. And you'll have a beautiful mineral dense broth that you can use for your cooking.
Oh, that sounds great. How does low waste eating tie into a person's health? This was something that I know is near and dear to you, and obviously as a physician, I would love to hear your thoughts on how this can actually even impact your health.
Yes, I think it all comes down when you're going to start thinking more intentionally about the food that you're bringing into your home and then prepping it. So, say like we said earlier, you meal plan on a Sunday, then you get all that food into your home. If you're
Hmm.
somebody who wants to reduce your waste, maybe you're prepping your food. So you're now making a soup on a Sunday that you're going to eat for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You're now cutting your bell peppers so they're more accessible for a snack, and carrots and celery. And when you're tying this in, ultimately, when you're heading into the drive through less because you've got food to eat at home, you're going to be eating healthier. It's all
Hmm.
about cooking for yourself and then also looking at the potential of your plants. So if you're going to be consuming things like your radish tops, like your beet leaves, you're ultimately going to be getting a more diverse microbiome, your gut health, and supporting your health in so many ways. So it's really more about, if you're eating low waste, eating the food that you're actually well intentioned buying. Because if you do that, your health is just going to benefit in so many ways.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that we have in our society is that we try to tend to go for what's easy. And sometimes what's easy is what's packaged and you grab it out of your pantry and it's an ultra processed food that's not good for you. And so just like you said, is if you do a little bit of planning, then you can make these kind of little healthy snacks accessible for you. So when you do kind of want to grab something, you don't go for the chips, you go for the potato skin natural chips that you
Yeah.
air fry, so it's better for you. So do you have a favorite recipe in your new book? So I'm here with Carleigh Bodrug. She's a good friend of mine. She's huge on social media. It's Plant You on pretty much all the platforms, right?
Yeah, Plant You, you can find me everywhere.
And her new book is Scrappy Cooking: 140 plant-based, zero waste recipes that are good for you, your wallet, and the planet. It is a beautiful new cookbook. Her first cookbook was a New York Times bestseller. I'm sure that this is going to be one as well. And if it isn't, then that's their problem, not yours, because man, this is going to be massive. And I know that you've got, I mean, tens of thousands of people who are pre ordering it and are interested in it. But what is your favorite recipe from the book?
So there's a recipe I make probably every week from the book, and there's about 25 recipes in the book that are earmarked as kitchen raid recipes. And these are really meant to be recipes where people can interchange the vegetables in their fridge for whatever they have on hand. And this came from a need that I constantly get messages every day where people are asking me, can I substitute like a sweet potato for a butternut squash? And the truth is, 9 times out of 10, 100% you can. And I really want to empower people to be able to learn to cook for themselves and make these choices and use up the food in their fridge. So one of them is called a peanut butter curry, and we make this all the time. It's a red curry, which is my favorite food in the world, with a little bit of peanut butter, coconut milk, ginger,
Mm,
garlic. And I will
that
just
sounds great.
put whatever I have on hand in this. So chickpeas, broccoli, bell peppers, peas, and you can interchange. We interchange it each week. And that's really one that like we're cycling through all the time.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Well, her name is Carleigh Bodrug, and her new book is Scrappy Cooking: 140 plus plant-based, zero waste recipes that are good for you, your wallet, and the planet. We've had a great discussion today. Even if you're not plant-based, which I am not, and I love her cookbooks, and I know I'm going to love this one once I get my hands on it as well. Um, I'd like to ask you one final question, Carleigh. If you can have one final tip for our listeners and our viewers today, what would that be?
One foot in front of the other, one meal at a time. You don't have to be a food waste queen or king overnight. You don't have to go vegan. It's just about making better decisions each meal. And that's really how we start building really sustainable changes over time.
That's great advice. Thank you
Before
so
we
much for
go,
joining me.
before we go,
Yes, yes.
I am obsessed with your skincare. And I want to tell everybody that I was not paid to say this. I've been meaning to talk about it on Instagram. I am through the cleansing
Oh,
oil,
wow.
life changing, a life
Oh,
changing
great.
product, and then the retinol cream. Everybody,
Oh, well, thank you.
get on the Youn Beauty skincare. The oil will like melt the makeup off your face. It's unbelievable.
Oh,
I just
thank you.
wanted to mention mention
Oh,
that
I
because I was
appreciate it.
getting ready this morning. I'm like, I need to bring these on.
So first, my friends, make sure you get her new book, Scrappy Cooking: 140 plus plant-based, zero waste recipes. And then if you want to take a look, and we do have our products on Amazon as well, but take a peek at Carleigh's new cookbook. It is absolutely beautiful. If you buy one cookbook this year, this is the one you want
Oh,
to
thank
buy.
you.
Whether you're plant-based or not, you're going to love this cookbook. I guarantee you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Carleigh. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
It was a blast. Thank you so much.
So my name is Dr. Anthony Youn. This is the Holistic Plastic Surgery Show. And everybody, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you can leave a rating or review on iTunes, it definitely helps me spread the word. And always remember to eat real food, use clean skincare, and auto-juvenate before you operate.